Good morning. As we know, good morning is always the right greeting, no matter the time of day. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you in the Meetverse. For the first time, this experience being surrounded by huge billboards of NFTs is really beyond what I imagined. And it's a huge upgrade from my cracked iPhone screen that I usually look at when I'm looking at NFTs. I'm Dr. Nettra Pan. I use the Twitter handle @Nettra and at Art10 Studio. And I first heard of NFTs 18 months ago. And like many of you, I only started minting, collecting, and researching NFTs more seriously earlier this year. Please do @me. If you're here, it means that you're early, and therefore I'd like to hear from you. Today, I'd like to talk about true ownership, NFTs, and some legit first principles responsible for the hype that has brought us here today. In the next 9 minutes, I want to make one simple point. I believe that by enabling regular individuals like you and me around the world to truly own their digital assets, non-fungible tokens are facilitating one of the most basic but vital building blocks of human society. True ownership aided by NFTs codifies, normalizes, and democratizes our right to own what we earn and our right to own what we create. Why? Well, NFTs have forced us to undergo the intellectual and conceptual exercise of articulating what digital ownership is. This new understanding, one that definitely kept me up at night trying to figure out what on earth this Bored Ape means to me, it further codifies, normalizes, and democratizes our right to own, truly own, physical things in the physical world as well. But this complex understanding of what ownership is didn't happen overnight. We're still trying to tease out all the parts, what it truly means to own something. And many of you in the NFT community know of the different controversies regarding selling or destroying different pieces of work. It really is pushing us to see the limits of this conceptual understanding of what ownership is. But we're also not fully there yet. So I want to walk you through 3 developments that I've seen that have brought us to where we are and what our task ahead requires of us. First of all, we have managed to scale ownership rights for physical property. Second, we've managed to scale ownership rights for digital property, financial property. And last, this is where I believe we are, and this is where I believe there is much work to be done. We now need to scale creative rights for digital assets, creative rights for digital assets. This means bringing in the voices that we need to hear from, bringing in the perspectives that we need to actually create these valuable assets. All right, scaling ownership rights for physical property. Can anybody guess who this is? He's very important in American history. Yes, okay, so he was one of the first people who made this, this case for why we have a legitimate reason to own our goods, to own property. And there have been a number of different developments all around the world that have enabled people to own property based on the labor that they put in. I would say that in this first development, we're kind of in the orange phase. Things are very warm, but they're not as warm as they could be. For example, this is a picture of the Dalit caste in India, and despite one of the Punjab Village Common Lands Regulation Act in 1961, they still do not fully have the right to own property. Yet, I would say, as a society, we have progressed a lot, and many of us are able to own physical property. Second, scaling ownership rights for digital property. So that's actually me and my grandmother. And the reason why I shared this picture with you is because she survived the Khmer Rouge regime in 1975 to 1979. And one of the ways that she was able to get enough food to feed her family in this communist regime where we couldn't own property is she had gold jewelry, which she managed to trade for rice. So we're now at this different stage in the developing world where we don't have to put our value, store our value in these physical things, jewelry or furniture, thanks to developments in microfinance, now storing value in a bank account and having access to financial services has become much more widespread. So I would believe that we're now scaling ownership rights for digital property through these great inventions such as microfinance, M-Pesa, and of course our very own Bitcoin white paper and BitPesa, which is a combination of the two. We're also starting to have more ownership of our data through data protection laws. Now, this is where I think we are, and this is where I'm so happy to be here, and where I'm so inspired by all of you. I think we now need to start scaling creative rights for digital assets. So we now have the technology to actually store value in financial means. We also have the ability to store value creatively. But what we need is we need to bring in more people to actually create those assets. And so I just want to give a shout out to, you know this team. They were part of curating the art for this conference. And there are several initiatives here that have been working on bringing in the voices that we need to actually bring more creators and the perspectives that we need to actually create these digital assets, now that we have the technology to protect that ownership once they are created. All right, so that was the one thing that I wanted to say, that I believe that NFTs are enabling us to actually claim true ownership of digital assets, which seeps into physical assets and seeps into the very cultural value that we create. What I think NFTs have done is take basically these non-tangible tokens, these implicit cultural indicators, and they've made them more tangible. Now this cultural value can be created and represented as an NFT, but we need more underrepresented voices creating those tokens. And what I think is really exciting is even though we've started in the digital space and we've seen how NFTs can actually enhance our digital identity, we've seen how actually people wear profile pictures, they adorn themselves, as we have for hundreds of years with JPEGs. I've also seen, and we see it in this very conference, this interplay between the development on the digital side, our increased strict understanding of the conceptual ideas of value and of ownership seeping into the meatverse. And I finally want to leave you with this question. I wonder, do you know which countries that crypto is the most popular? You can shout out. Philippines, Vietnam are in the top 5. Venezuela is up there as well. India, Nigeria, yes, Nigeria is #1. So this is actually a great representation of the map. For those of you who watch The West Wing, you know it's a more realistic depiction of how the world works. And you'll see that according to a study done in 2020, Nigeria was the country that was most likely to have people that owned or used cryptocurrency. Nigeria was at the top, Vietnam followed, Philippines, Turkey, and Peru. As you can see, the top 5 countries are in the developing world. So I want to ask you, where is crypto then most necessary? And where can crypto be most transformational? And I would urge you to look for different perspectives and use your privilege to bring people whose voices we need to hear so that they can create these digital assets that we know and love so much. Follow me at Nettra and at Art 10 Studio. Would love to hear what you think and continue the conversation. Thank you for your attention.